ravage sparsely populated planets for resources. They were primarily driven by the petty pursuit of wealth. In those early years, there was still a relatively small and inconsequential criminal organization when you take a look at the larger criminal underworld, and they mostly picked on very weak and underdeveloped settlements where no one could really fight back against them. Actually, their actions helped create the pirate organization known as Empy's Nest, which would later be a thorn in the side of their operations. The chaos and destruction of the Clone Wars would naturally create more opportunities for criminal organizations like the Crimson Dawn, with law enforcement and the Jedi focused more on pressing issues like war. The Crimson Dawn would soon expand in size and attract the attention of ex-Sith Maul. To understand the criminal syndicates during the Imperial era, you have to first understand Maul and his role as an organizer and leader of the criminal underworld. Maul was taken from his mother Talzin, a great Dathomiri witch, from a very young age to be trained as a Sith assassin and the first apprentice of Darth Sidious. He was extremely proficient at his job, and he would help the Sith seed chaos all across the galaxy. Step 1 in the Sith grand plan to destroy the Jedi. During the invasion of Naboo, after successfully defeating Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn in single combat, Maul underestimated Qui-Gon's Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi and would be cut down to size. Maul would have to endure extreme suffering and trauma on his turbulent road towards making himself whole. He eventually found his legs during the middle of the chaotic Clone Wars and started rebuilding his life. During the galaxy-wide war, Maul would also find opportunity. He would start an organization known as the Shadow Collective in an effort to gain power and build a faction to serve his ambitions. Maul would target the various criminal organizations in the underworld, which were all growing in size, and he would use his own force powers and his brother's physical brutality and size to basically make everyone else fall in line.
We are the Black Sun!
They were the Black Sun. The Pike Syndicate would fall into line shortly after this awesome display of rearranging the Black Sun's leadership, and the Hutt clans would also fall in line. The much smaller criminal organization known as the Crimson Dawn would also join in the Shadow Collective. It got a lot easier for Maul to convince more organizations to join once he knocked down the first two big ones. And this was kind of the strength of Maul, and this was the benefit that he brought to the galaxy. It was already unprecedented for all of these major crime families to stop warring against each other, and it was extremely rare for them to actually work together in joint operations. In a strange way, by bringing order to all of these criminal syndicates, he limited the amount of random acts of violence that happened, especially in the Outer Rim, and this benefited people in the short term. In the long term, these criminal organizations would still exploit people, rob them of their money, so that wasn't that good, but basically Maul created a new faction, a united criminal organization. He would use the Shadow Collective to create his own personal kingdom by overthrowing the politically weakened monarch of Mandalore. Even though Maul ruled Mandalore through puppet leaders, Darth Sidious ultimately found out what his plan was and brought him to heel, not as his apprentice again, but simply as his plaything.
Helldiver, you are moving outside the mission area.
The experience almost broke Maul, but he would eventually escape thanks to the help of Death Watch. This was a Mandalorian organization he had also co-opted, and he would basically crawl back to Mandalore and hide on his throne for the rest of the war, until that was also taken away from him during the climactic siege of Mandalore, right on the eve of Order 66. As the walls started closing in around him again, Maul told his most loyal lieutenants to go to ground and wait for his signal.
What's going on?
Maul just told the Syndicate leaders to go into hiding.
Soon, the galaxy will be remade, and in the chaos, we must seize what power we can.
Maul had a sense that something big was about to happen. He was, after all, force sensitive, and he had visions of great disaster and burning and fire. He also understood how evil and villainous his master Darth Sidious was, his former master. Maul would barely escape the siege of Mandalore with his life intact. Ironically, he would also almost be killed during Order 66, despite not being a Jedi. Everyone was a victim to Palpatine's machinations. Once again cast into the wild, Maul would start rebuilding, and this time he would gather his old criminal syndicate contacts and establish what was known as the Five Syndicates. An homage, perhaps, to the Five Families, which refers to the Italian mafia families that operated as a structured entity in New York City in the 1930s, after an intense civil war between the old Sicilian mob and newer American Italian mob restructured how the mafia worked. Anyway, the Five Syndicates included the Black Sun, the Crymora Syndicate, the Hutt clans, and of course, the Pike Syndicate and Crimson Dawn. Although Maul only directly ran the Crimson Dawn, the leaders of the syndicates were absolutely terrified of him and what he was capable of. Remember what Maul and his brother did to the Black Sun leadership during the Clone Wars. And so when Maul gave the directive that none of these syndicates would war against each other, they all listened, and it was actually very beneficial for all of them. They were able to basically concentrate on their own holdings, become more powerful and prosperous together. Maul would guide the Crimson Dawn from the shadows. He would personally train his proxy Dryden Voss to lead the organization, and for a while it appeared as if the Crimson Dawn was just like any other syndicate, focused on acquiring wealth and power. But there was always something a bit more professional, more focused, and deadly about how they went about their business. You see, Maul was creating a syndicate army. The first step was peace and unity. The second step was developing a central command system, an intel-gathering organization. That's where the Crimson Dawn came in play. This wasn't like a normal gang. Although it dabbled in all sorts of illegal activity, its main resource, its main weapon, was actually information. They gathered it, they traded it, and they used it to control and manipulate the powerful individuals who ran the galaxy. It's similar to the Sith strategy employed by Darth Plagueis, the master of Darth Sidious, to operate from the shadows and pull the strings without revealing one's true identity. And it makes sense that Maul would do this because he does come from the lineage of Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious. And at the same time, the Crimson Dawn acted like an intelligence agency. As a matter of fact, they rivaled the ISB at this time in how many connections and assets they had in the shadowy underworld. All of this setup was designed to do one thing, and that was to destroy Emperor Palpatine and his empire. But even the best laid out plans go awry sometimes, and Dryden Voss actually gets killed by his own protege, Kira. And then after that, Maul would die in a mission on Tatooine chasing after his old rival.
Extract when ready.
With the death of both Dryden Voss and Maul, Kira, the street urchin from Corellia, a former friend of Han Solo, would take over the organization. And so at this point, the last piece of the puzzle would fall into place. Whereas Maul was driven by hatred and fear of the Empire. Kira, who had grown up on the streets of Corellia as an orphan, had witnessed the suffering the Empire brought to his people firsthand. She saw the inequality and poverty created by the military-industrial complex, which had destroyed all of the other economic output on the world. She had a lifetime to reflect on how the Empire affected the common people, and she knew exactly how to start what essentially was a rebellion. She saw how the Empire stole resources, how they allowed criminal organizations to run rampant without any investment to local worlds or population. She developed a much deeper and intimate understanding of why the Empire needed to stop. When Maul was in power, the Crimson Dawn and the Five Families were ruled by fear. Fear of an ex-Sith Lord's double-bladed lightsaber should they step out of line. When Maul's death reached these syndicates, the peace between all of these organizations broke down, and it was also assumed that the Crimson Dawn was more or less destroyed. But Kira had something far more potent than the order Maul created from fear. She had this political message she had been forming all of her life, this ideology she had created. She wanted the Imperial hierarchy to be destroyed so that Palpatine's stranglehold on power in the galaxy could be released to the masses, so that more organizations, more individuals had a chance of rising up and claiming a piece of that power structure for themselves. She wanted power in the galaxy to be distributed like an endless mountain range with many peaks, none dramatically higher than the other. A reset of the order of the galaxy. This is what made the Crimson Dawn and its allies more dangerous than other organizations. This ideology made them far more focused and dedicated. It wasn't just about getting credits, which is what most thugs and gangsters were after. Greed can only get you so far. Ideas like this can make one fanatic, willing to sacrifice their life for a cause, for a common goal. In this way, Kira's Crimson Dawn isn't all that different from the Rebel Alliance. Kira had been well trained by Maul. She understood the weakness of the Empire. She had been taught the arts of the Sith, how to manipulate the other criminal factions into getting what she wanted. In this way, Kira also belonged to the lineage of Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious and Maul. She would create a great network of mercenaries, criminals from various factions, along with Imperial soldiers and officers, politicians, who she could call on to help her in her quest to destroy the Empire. In our deep dives of how the Empire affected the galaxy, we always talk about how the Empire was the greatest recruiter for rebel factions and dissident movements. And so, all Kira had to do was reach out and find these individuals and gain their loyalty. And so, in Star Wars Outlaws, if you do find the Crimson Dawn, their presence will be relatively limited. You most likely won't see them holding wide swaths of territory and patrolling around areas like the other criminal organizations. Instead, their main focus is going to be keeping small little offices, almost embassies, on these worlds, and keeping close to the power structure and economic structure of those worlds so that they could gain more assets through their secretive network of informants. She would also gather powerful allies, current and future enemies of Palpatine, and she did this always in secret. Kira would recruit Madeline's son, otherwise known as the Archivist, a historian of the Force. Kira respected the power of the Force, and she realized in order to understand Palpatine, she needed to know about his power. She even tried to convince the Archivist to go find Grandmaster Yoda and have him aid their cause. Kira would also seek out the Knights of Ren, dark side warriors who had been in hiding from Emperor Palpatine. She proposed an alliance against the Sith so that they could live free and without fear. There was also the Orphans, a group of orphans led by bounty hunter Chana Cha, whose parents were murdered by Darth Vader. Kira could connect personally to this group because of their shared orphan past. And so, as you can see, the Crimson Dawn was not picky about who they chose to ally themselves with. As a matter of fact, they preferred to work with the dredges of society, the outcasts, individuals that no one really paid attention to because they oftentimes made the best spies, informants, and assassins. Now, the Crimson Dawn had a pretty outrageous plan to destroy the Empire. And it all starts with the recent capture of Han Solo on Bespin City. His body was frozen in carbonite and taken by the bounty hunter Boba Fett to Nar Shaddaa. You see, Kira wanted to create a big galaxy where she could attract all of the major players in the galaxy to one place where they could witness the rebirth of the Crimson Dawn beneath her control. Remember, most people thought that after all, that this organization was gone. And so the central piece to track everyone there was actually Han Solo. The smuggler turned out to be the perfect bait because he had basically ripped off almost everyone in the galaxy, and many would love to have a statue of him. And so the Crimson Dawn would steal Han Solo from Boba Fett and announce that they were holding an auction for him. Everyone was invited. The various criminal factions, along with the Empire and the Rebel Alliance, would arrive on the Crimson Dawn yacht to Vermilion as planned, and the Hutts would actually win the auction with a bid of 1 million credits. But then at the last minute, Darth Vader arrives and just takes Solo from Jabba, who has no choice but to agree. It was at this moment that Kira confronted Vader and demanded that he pay 1 million credits owed for Solo. This was a power play to show the rest of the gangs that Kira was not afraid, and that the Crimson Dawn was truly back and powerful. Kira even manages to duel Vader for a short period of time using the Terrasakasi martial arts technique taught to her by Dryden Voss. This was a martial arts technique used by non-Force sensitives to basically hold their own against Force sensitives. It was relatively hard to master, but you're only shocked in melee combat against someone as powerful as Vader. Kira holds her own for a few seconds before getting ragdolled by the powerful Sith Lord, but that was really enough for her and the Crimson Dawn to win respect from all of the various criminal organizations that were definitely not brave enough to step in and fight Darth Vader. Now, the story doesn't end here. There's one Hutt named Boku, who had actually been radicalized by Kira and the Crimson Dawn. Kira wants to create tension and chaos in the galaxy and use that to basically attack the Empire. And so she has Boku attack the Empire as they're transferring Han Solo's body to the Executor class Super Star Destroyer. The Hutt High Council would watch in terror as Boku orders the Hutt fleet to attack the mighty Imperial warship. It's truly a futile effort. These pirate ships were no match for the most powerful ship in the entire galaxy. I mean, this thing was like 19 kilometers long. And Kira gets exactly what she wants. This attack by the Hutts against the Empire creates friction between these two organizations. You see, the Hutts and the Empire had an agreement of sorts, an exclusive deal that no other criminal organization had. They were basically working alongside each other. The Hutts would provide the Empire all sorts of more sketchy services, from running black site prisons to giving them bounty hunters for assassination missions, and in return the Empire was protecting their territory, which was a huge plus. But this attack by Boku would basically destroy most of that, and Darth Vader arrives on the Hutt Council's barge and kills the entire leadership, except for Jabba. This created a huge opening for the other criminal syndicates, and right away they started vying for power because they believed that they could replace the Hutts' position alongside the Emperor. And of course, Kira and the Crimson Dawn were more than happy to spread rumors that Emperor Palpatine was looking for a replacement for the Hutts, and was looking for a criminal organization that was dangerous and violent enough to help the Empire. And of course, all the criminal cartels start fighting each other. She also released the orphans on the Galaxy syndicates and had them carry out several high-profile false flag attacks against various syndicates. They left no survivors, no evidence that the Crimson Dawn were involved in these attacks, and this just makes things go to the next level. Thus started the Syndicate War, a period of great unrest and uncertainty for the criminal underworld that would last several months. Kira would use all of this chaos to move against the Empire, and at the same time, the Empire's resources would be stretched thin, dealing with all of this violence that basically came out of nowhere. Kira even manages to get close enough to poison the Emperor's own Royal Imperial Guard. Eventually, however, the Emperor would wise up to her strategy, and he would force the criminal syndicates to stop fighting each other, and he would place a bounty on the Crimson Dawn leaders. Now, it's hard to say exactly when the game Star Wars Outlaws takes place. It could be before the Syndicate War, it could be during or after. I feel like either way, this is going to play a huge role in how these various criminal organizations behave and react to one another. The Crimson Dawn will definitely be a faction worth looking out for, but beware guys, even if their goals seem lofty and righteous, Kira is ruthless, even more so than Saw Gerrera. She's willing to do whatever it takes to win, even if it means sacrificing your ass along the way on some side missions. So be careful, and guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our coverage of the lore and content behind the scenes with Star Wars Outlaws. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.
In 1941, the British government finally and reluctantly agreed to let a speed freak build their next warplane. And this man took two 1,600 horsepower engines, stuck them inside of a wooden airplane, and things immediately got out of hand in the best way possible. Today we're talking about the DH-98 de Havilland Mosquito. And while the official nickname is the Mosquito, it also goes by the Mossy, the Loping Lumberyard, the Wooden Wonder, and the Timber of Terror. And when something has that many different nicknames, you know it's going to be good. And just like so many other stories, this story too begins with a word from our sponsor, because this video is brought to you by my favorite sporting goods store, Shields. They've got a bunch of really cool retail locations all across the United States and an even better online store where you can get pretty much anything that has anything to do with going outside or being physically active. Or beef jerky. They have a bunch of beef jerky too. Anyways, if you use the link on my website or in the description down below, you're going to get free shipping on your order. Let's get back to this video. Our story begins in 1909 with Sir Geoffrey de Havilland. He is 27 years old, he just got married, and he has spent his entire life working on, building, and designing cars and motorcycles. But now, they're just not fast enough. There's this new thing out, airplanes, and they can go even faster. So naturally, he's got to get him one of those. The only problem is, building a plane, as I'm sure you can imagine, costs a lot of money, even back then when they were just biplanes. So where's he going to get all this money? Well, he's going to do exactly what any self-respecting man would do. He's going to go to grandma for a 0% interest loan. And when I say a 0% interest loan, I mean he goes to his grandmother and asks for a, and I quote, advance on his inheritance. Straight up, Grandma, you need to fucking die or front me the money because I'm trying to make history over here. So Grandma, being the gangster that she is, decides that she's going to give little Geoffrey £1,000 for his airplane project. Now, full stop. £1,000. You're like, oh, $1,000. That's a lot of money. No, this is 1909. £1,000 back then is equivalent to like almost $200,000 American, okay? Like Grandma is apparently loaded. So he gets all this money and he begins designing and making his own airplane. And after 2 long years, the day finally comes that his airplane is finished and it's finally ready for its first flight. So he hops in, takes his plane up into the sky, and everything goes absolutely perfect right until he crashed it. The plane is completely destroyed, and like every other speed freak and race car driver I've ever met in my entire life, de Havilland just crawls out of the wreckage and was like, that's fun, let's do that again. He then proceeds to make his very own aircraft manufacturing company. Fast forward a couple of decades, de Havilland owns a very successful airplane company, and it's the early 1930s, and everybody is beginning to make their planes out of metal, but de Havilland isn't having it because he thinks that making planes out of metal is dumb. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing here, but he's basically like, metal weighs more than wood, which means that my plane is going to be slower by making it out of metal. Why on earth would I do that? To which the entire aviation community basically yells at the guy like, well, metal is stronger than wood, duh, and he's like, Fucking, it's an airplane. What? Just don't run it into shit. It'll be fine. If you want strong, go build a tank. What are we even talking about here? Have you ever seen a fucking squirrel with knight's armor on? No, it doesn't make any fucking sense. So de Havilland's like, fine, I'm just gonna have to prove it to these people. 1934, they're gonna have the McRobertson Air Race. It's 11,200 miles from England to Melbourne, Australia. You have to fly all the way there. You can take any route you want. You can stop to refuel as many times as you want. There's this huge cash prize of 15,000 pounds. All the fastest airplanes on the planet are going to show up and try to win this race. So de Havilland creates a DH-88 Comet, ends up being the fastest plane in the world at this point in time, and obviously wins this race. And obviously, nobody cares because it's made out of wood, and they said that that's dumb. So nobody's going to learn anything from the point he just proved. Fast forward 1936, post-World War I, Germany is starting to rearm their entire country. Britain takes note, and they're like, wow, we should build up some weapons too in case they try something. So they put out a bid. They let all the aircraft manufacturers know that they're looking for a twin-engine medium bomber that's capable of carrying 3,000 pounds and cruising at a speed of 300 miles an hour. So there's money to be made with the government contract. All the airplane manufacturers flock to it and start putting in their bids and their designs for their plans. And pretty much all of them follow the conventional knowledge of how to build a bomber at this point in time, which was to have a humongous, powerful airplane made out of metal and absolutely covered in machine guns everywhere, because you need to be able to fire in all directions to fight off all the fighter planes that are going to try to shoot you down. And absolutely everybody follows that basic outline except for de Havilland. He decides that he's going to build a plane using a completely different ideology from everybody else. Instead of having a plane that's going to have armor and machine guns and be able to win a firefight in the air against other fighter planes, he's just going to avoid the firefight altogether. Because at the end of the day, the bomber's job isn't to shoot down fighter airplanes, it's to deliver the bomb. He's going to get rid of all the armor, all the machine guns, all the defensive countermeasures that other bombers have, and use all of his efforts to try to get this plane as fast as possible to just be able to outrun the firefight. Because you know what's better than getting shot at and having body armor on? Not getting shot at. Realizing that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, he's going to make this plane as fast as possible. And to do that, he's going to make it out of wood. Again. So, he builds his wooden bomber. He then proceeds to take the most powerful aircraft engine on the planet, the Merlin, and sticks 2 of them inside of this thing. And this aircraft is the fastest warplane on the planet. With a cruising speed of 325 miles an hour and a max speed of almost 400 miles an hour, this thing is absolutely untouchable, and that's not even the impressive part. It's the manufacturing process where de Havilland's idea stands head and shoulders above the competition. You have to remember, they're going into World War II. Plastic wasn't widely used yet, and anything that's plastic today was probably metal back then. Metal was used for absolutely everything from canteens to tanks to airplanes. All of it was metal, meaning that throughout the course of World War II, metal became extremely scarce, so much so that America was trying to build ships out of concrete, and Great Britain was trying to build an aircraft carrier out of wood pulp and ice. So being able to build a bomber out of a cheap and readily available resource like wood was a humongous deal. And it all trickles down from there, because not only are you just using an untapped resource, by using wood, that means that you're not going to have metal workers and riveters working on the plane. You're going to have woodworkers working on your plane, which at this point in time was a pretty much untapped labor pool that was still doing other stuff like building cabinets and pianos. They had no real way to contribute to the war effort, except now they do. And the list of benefits keeps going. I feel like I'm in an infomercial.
But I'm not done yet.
Because the Mosquito's plan is not to fight firefights in the air, but to simply outrun them, you know what the Mosquito doesn't need? Machine guns. You know what you don't need if you don't have machine guns? Ammunition. And you know what you also don't need if you don't have machine guns? People to fire the machine guns. So you're also saving guns, ammunition, and personnel, because the Mosquito only has 2 crew members. And you know what all those things do? They add weight to the aircraft, like over 1,000 pounds, meaning that now that all that's gone, the Mosquito can now carry an extra 1,000 pounds worth of bombs to drop on the enemy, which is actually what a bomber's job is. So just to recap, de Havilland has now delivered a bomber to the British government that is made out of a readily available resource with a brand new untapped labor pool that is cheaper in pretty much every way, and it delivers more bombs faster to the enemy. So clearly, the British government fucking hates it. And I mean, really, Sir Geoffrey de Havilland really should be more considerate. How are these poor politicians and defense contractors going to be able to feed their kids if he's out here trying to make planes that are cheap and reliable? I mean, what's the point of even going to war if you're not going to make a bunch of money off of it, right? Look, I guess I'm just glad it's not a uniquely American thing for this to happen. So all the other aircraft manufacturers are talking smack about de Havilland's idea. They're saying that it's basically a giant model airplane and that wood is not a suitable building material for a respectable plane and all this other stuff that they're desperately trying to come up with so that he doesn't win the bid. And that's when Lord Teeny Mittens, Beaverbrook over here chimes in. He's the Minister of Aircraft Production for all of Britain and he just shuts the project down. I'm assuming it's because a giant model airplane would make his hands look even tinier.
I've got these tiny hands, and that's gonna make them look even tinier.
In fact, the only person that even liked the idea of the Mosquito was the Air Marshal for the RAF, Sir Wilfrid Freeman, who also, by sheer coincidence, is the only man in this conversation that has flown planes in combat and presumably knows what he's actually talking about and doesn't have a vested financial interest in the outcome. Freeman is also responsible for the RAF ordering the Spitfire, the Hurricane, and the Lancaster bomber, as well as the development of the Merlin engine. Like, he's got a pretty good track record of picking amazing planes. So obviously we're going to listen to what Sir Wilfrid Freeman has to say, right? Wrong. 100% wrong. What we're going to do is we're going to have Lord Bitch Mittens over here, fire him, transfer him to a different department, and then take credit for all of his accomplishments and use that newfound status to kill the Mosquito Project once and for all. Because politics. And that's pretty much it. 1937, the British government told de Havilland, kick rocks, we're not interested, we're going to move on with our life. Fast forward, 1940, World War II has in fact kicked off, and it is not looking that great for the British, because we are right in the middle of the Battle of Britain. Okay, if you don't know, the Battle of Britain, also known as the Air Battle for England, was basically the Germans were bombing Britain every day for about 3 months straight. Britain was obviously sending up their air force to fight back. Both sides lost thousands of people and thousands of airplanes. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you the RAF is now short a bunch of planes and a bunch of pilots, and there's really no way of replenishing the amount of planes because metal is extremely scarce, as well as the manpower to make the planes anyways. If only there was some type of plane that they could make out of an alternative material to metal that had a completely different labor force to build it. Oh wait, we've had that literally the entire time, we just didn't want to use it because of politics. Perfect. So the British government finally reluctantly orders 50 of them. So de Havilland gets to work right away, builds all these planes, turns them over to the RAF. The RAF then starts practicing with them, and the pilots absolutely love them. The only problem is they're a little bit hard to take off and land, which makes sense because they're basically a paper airplane with a fucking V8 attached to it. So the decision gets made that only the best pilots are going to be allowed to fly these things, and now we got to find what the first mission for the Mosquito is going to be, and it's going to be super secret because nobody knows that this plane even exists yet. So up until this point in the war, the British really didn't have a surveillance plane capable of flying over enemy territory and seeing what they were up to, so they were actually using their fighters, the Spitfire, to do that. And while the Spitfire is awesome, it sucked for this particular job because it simply couldn't hold enough fuel to go very far into enemy territory. The Mosquito, on the other hand, instead of filling it with bombs, we're just going to fill it with an extra gas tank, and this thing is going to be able to fly from England all the way to the Soviet Union and back in one flight without refueling, and that's exactly what it does. Yeah, the Mosquito is, for all intents and purposes, the world's first long-range reconnaissance aircraft that set the groundwork for every aircraft after it. It's basically the acoustic SR-71. So that's what they use it for the rest of 1941. 1942 rolls around, they're like, oh hey, good idea. This thing can hold 4,000 pounds worth of ordnance. What if we just did one 500-pound bomb and some extra fuel tanks, and then we could bomb super deep into enemy territory? And that's exactly what they're going to do. Operation Jericho, a bunch of wooden wonders are going to low-level penetrate deep into enemy territory and deliver a payload. Try saying that with a straight face. So a bunch of Mosquitoes take off to Norway. They are going to bomb Gestapo headquarters with 500-pound bombs. They fly all the way there above the ground and or ocean at like 100 feet, make it there more or less completely undetected, and bomb Gestapo headquarters. The only problem was, because they were so low to the ground, they decided that they were going to extend the fuse time on the bombs because they don't detonate on impact, they detonate on a timer. So they extended the timer to 11 seconds to allow the planes to get out of the blast radius and bomb. So they went ahead and they dropped the bombs. The bombs were a direct hit on the Gestapo building. The only problem was the fuse was a little bit too long, and a 500-pound bomb traveling at like 400 miles an hour apparently has enough force in it to go through one wall, through the building, and out the other wall, and all 4 of the bombs did exactly that, flying completely through the building before detonating. So the mission failed successfully. Did they accomplish their goal? Not really, but they did prove that the Mosquitoes were pretty much unstoppable and very accurate. So now they're going to begin using the Mosquitoes to nuisance bomb Germany. Every night, they're going to be sending out swarms of mosquitoes to bomb Germany on their own home turf to begin weakening their morale. And with the mosquitoes, this works for some reason way better than any other plane was ever able to do it. Like, the mosquitoes rarely ever get caught when they're dropping bombs. So they're kind of like, okay, well, let's try a bigger bomb then. And the RAF starts using the mosquito to drop the 4,000-pound blockbuster bomb on Berlin. They then proceeded to do that every single night for 220 nights straight, earning it the nickname the Berlin Express. And then somebody at the RAF finally puts together the fact that maybe the mosquitoes are so successful at not getting caught on their bombing runs, not necessarily because it's nighttime and not necessarily because they're really fast, but because they're made out of wood, and wood doesn't give off nearly as strong of a radar signature as metal does. Which means it stands to reason that they would have just as much success bombing during the day as they would at night. Which, if successful, is going to be extra demoralizing because at this point in time, everybody understands that there's never bombing raids during the daylight because the fighter jets would be able to take them out immediately. But in the case of the Mosquito, if they don't get picked up on radar, nobody might scramble the fighter jets until it's too late. So the RAF, with their immaculate sense of British humor, realize that this is a very rare opportunity to troll the enemy that they cannot afford to waste. So, British intelligence finds out that January 30th, 1943, the Nazis are going to be holding a humongous rally to celebrate their 10-year anniversary of coming to power. It's going to be huge. Hitler's right-hand man, Hermann Göring, is going to be there giving a big speech. They're going to put the entire thing out on the radio waves so the whole country can hear it. It's going to be a huge morale boost to the Nazis. And it probably was right up until the RAF sent out the mosquitoes and bombed all of the broadcasting towers for Berlin, so the entire country just got to hear explosions, screams, and then the radio cut out forever. And then the British turned it into an entire propaganda thing, because not only are we hitting you on your own home turf in broad daylight, it's also in a wooden plane. So the Nazis are absolutely furious. They want to retaliate, so they ramp up air raids on Britain. The only problem is they can't really pull them off in daylight, but it is 1943, so they have figured out how to put radar in their individual fighter planes, meaning that the night raids are going to be far more successful than they ever were before. Or so they thought, because guess what? The British have a plane that's pretty much immune to radar. So they take the Mosquito bomber and they turn it into the bomber fighter by putting 4 20mm machine guns in the nose, plus another 4 Browning machine guns in the nose, and then send them out as night fighters, and they proceed to absolutely wreck the Luftwaffe in night combat because they can't be seen by radar and they have radar to see them. Then, after seeing how incredibly good the Mosquito was at night fighting, the RAF had another brilliant idea. What if they sent out a bunch of Mosquito night fighters to wait above German airfields and then sent out regular bombing raids with regular bombers, and when those bombers got picked up on radar, they would scramble the German fighters to go up and intercept them, but the Mosquitoes would already be above them and literally spawn kill the Germans the second they got in the air. Not only did this work, it virtually shut down the Luftwaffe's ability to operate at night altogether, and the British were able to bomb Germany completely unopposed. At this point, Hermann Göring is sitting in his office like,
Okay, fine, I'm cool, I'm fine.
okay, and you have to remember, Hermann Göring in World War I was a fighter pilot. He scored 7 kills in World War I, making him an ace. So, like, the whole aerial combat thing is like his ballpark. So the fact that the RAF is having a warheads on foreheads extravaganza and there's nothing he can do about it is driving him absolutely insane. And then you sprinkle on top the fact that he's over there with his superior German engineering and the RAF is just dunking on him and his men in what amounts to a Pinewood Derby plane. This man is about to lose his mind. So he creates a special division of the Luftwaffe whose sole purpose is to find and destroy the Mosquitoes. Okay, they're already struggling in the war, and this man has now just cut out an entire section of his Air Force to do nothing but hunt down these wooden planes and try to destroy them. Needless to say, it fails miserably. So at this point, Hermann Göring's like, well, if I can't beat him, I've got to join him. So he orders his men to build him a wooden plane. And they straight up copy the Mosquito. Like, so much so that they also call it the Mosquito, but they just spell it with a K. Like, straight up, yeah, you can copy my homework, but make it look a little bit different. That's what they did. So they get the Mosquito with a K built, and to the surprise of absolutely nobody, it's a pretty awesome plane. But then guess what happens to it? You're never gonna guess what happens to the German Mosquito. A bunch of high-ranking Nazis, politicians, get together and they're like, I don't think a wooden plane's a good idea. I want big, metal planes with metal armor and a bunch of machine guns all over them, because that's the way to go. The same political BS that shut down the British Mosquito 10 years prior is now holding up the Nazis. So much so that they don't even get their first test flight in until June of 1944, which is way too late in the war for the Nazis to begin making a new type of plane and mass producing it. So that's it. The Germans never really got their version of the Mosquito. They ended up losing World War II. Everybody lived happily ever after. So I guess while it was dipshit politicians with teeny hands that prevented the British from getting the Mosquito on time, it was also dipshit politicians that prevented the Nazis from getting the Mosquito on time. So everything kind of equals out in a weird roundabout kind of way. In conclusion, the de Havilland Mosquito at a glance might appear to be this one-off weird thing that happened one time during World War II. But in reality, it is probably the single most important and influential aircraft in aviation history. You see, all planes today are not built with the ideology that they need to have armor and machine guns in order to take a hit and return fire, or at least most of them aren't. They would pretty much all much rather be so fast that they can't be caught, or so sneaky that they never get seen. And that entire strategy was pioneered by a wooden plane in World War II known as a de Havilland Mosquito. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out. Also, the more I study history, the more absolutely positive
Calling down supplies!
Deploying equipment package.
Okay, no, seriously. It's like the saying, oh, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Ha ha ha. Except the horse is somehow your boss that you're, for some reason, partially responsible for hiring, but also you have no authority to fire. And now the horse is like making all these amazing stock trades with top secret information that only the horse could know, which is illegal, but also the horse gets to determine what's illegal, so you have no standing to do anything about it, even though you hired the horse and now you can't fire it.
Protect us!
Go buy a shirt at thefatelectrician.com. Thanks.
Calling in reinforcements!
Request approved. Deploying reinforcements.
This is a story of a B-17 pilot and a bombardier, two anti-heroes that become best friends and assemble their bombing crew out of a bunch of misfits that don't fit in anywhere else, and they become adamant on doing things their own way. So much so that the US government won't even give them a B-17 to fly. They then proceed to build their own and become the most heavily decorated air crew in US history. Today we're talking about Jay Zemer, Joe Sarnofsky, and their air crew, the Eager Beavers, the most decorated air crew in U.S. history, responsible for completing the most decorated mission in U.S. history, all while flying the most heavily armed bomber of World War II, Lucy, aka Old 666. This video is brought to you by Warwood Tool, makers of the original American entrenching tool from World War I, and while they're not making entrenching tools anymore, they are making sledgehammers and axes, and they're making them using the same drop hammer forging techniques that they used back in World War I, right out of West Virginia. If you need a tool for the rest of your life, check them out. This video is also brought to you by LAS Concealment. Full disclosure, I originally turned them down as a sponsor because I've done several holster making companies before, and I just think it's disingenuous to have a bunch of sponsors for the same type of product, so I said no. Despite that, they decided to send me a holster anyways for free, and it actually ended up becoming my favorite holster and the only one I've been carrying lately. So, moving forward, they are going to be the only holster sponsor of the channel.
I need a corporal. You're it until you're dead. Fine.
I wonder if I could get LAS to make me a holster for this sledgehammer. Anyways, back to the video. Starting off with our pilot and main character, Jay Zemer. Born in 1918, he grew up in Pennsylvania with a pretty wealthy family. For high school, he was sent to a military boarding school in Culver, Indiana. While there as a freshman, despite the school policy on no students having vehicles, he managed to acquire a Willys Motor Company Whippet, the direct predecessor of the Jeep. And he managed to turn this thing into an absolute hot rod, better than it ever ran before, until the school finally found out that a student had a car, which was against the rules, so he had a disciplinary meeting with the dean. He goes into this meeting with the dean, and he's like, look, I'm in the engineering program. I'm taking all the engineering classes. I want to go to school to be an engineer. I just rebuilt a motor, and I'm 14 years old. You guys should treat this as extra credit. To which the dean, being cool, is like, well, take me for a test drive, and we'll see. Takes the dean for a test drive.
Yeah, baby!
Dean has a great time. He ends up giving him extra credit and letting him keep the car the entire time he's at military boarding school. So his grades were a little lackluster his freshman year because he was busy restoring a car. After that, he aced absolutely everything from sophomore to senior year. He goes on to apply to MIT to become a civil engineer. He gets rejected by MIT because his grades were lacking his freshman year. So he drives his Whippet that he rebuilt all the way to MIT, and he camps outside the admissions office for days until they agree to meet him. He then goes in and proceeds to persuade the head of admissions to let him into MIT. So he gets into MIT, goes on to become an engineer. While he's at college, he joins the ROTC program, which is like the pre-officer training program that they have in most colleges. While he's there, he ends up flying a plane, and he absolutely loves it. It is now his new goal in life to become a fighter pilot. So naturally, he applies to go off to Army Air School to become a pilot, at which point he is pretty much immediately informed there's a 0% chance that he will ever get inside of a fighter plane because he's way too big. At this point in time, they only let the smaller guys be the fighter pilots, and all the bigger guys had to go work in bombers, and Jay was a big dude, well over 6 foot. So it's not exactly what he wanted, but it is the next best thing. No big deal. He goes in, does the paperwork, does the physical exam. Bad news, his eyes suck, and his vision is not good enough to become a pilot. So the entire notion of being a pilot gets shelved for now, at least. He goes back to college, continues going through the ROTC program to be an Army infantry officer, and while this is going on, he's constantly researching on ways to make his eyes better. And he finally comes across this crazy optometrist named Dr. Bates, and he has the Bates method. Basically, this method wanted to treat your eyes like they were muscles. Bates believed that glasses enabled your eyes to be lazy, so he would crush his patients' glasses and then force them to do a bunch of eye straining exercises in hopes of building up better vision, similar to how you would lift weights to get bigger muscles. One of these exercises included staring directly into the sun. Obviously, with hindsight being 2020, this didn't work that well, and it certainly wasn't recommended, but the young Jay Zemer wanted to be a pilot so bad that he was in fact willing to go outside every day and attempt to beat the sun in a staring contest.
How'd you like the taste of freedom?
Essentially trying to give himself a caveman version of LASIK. Obviously, this does not improve his eyesight. If anything, it makes it better, but it does highlight just how bad this guy wanted to be a pilot. So, World War II kicks off, standards get lowered, and he gets accepted into the bombing program. And from there, he becomes the top of his class pretty much immediately. He is so good at flying bombers that he can actually perform fighter maneuvers inside of a bomber, which is something most pilots would never even imagine. But not only is he naturally talented at it, he also works extremely hard. He could tell every single American, German, and Japanese plane and their capabilities just by their silhouette.
Friend or foe? No! You idiot! It's a pigeon!
So Jay Zemer is hands down the best bomber pilot in training right now, and somewhere along the line, during training, he becomes friends with the best bombardier in training by the name of Joe Sarnofsky. This guy is basically the Larry Bird at putting warheads on foreheads. They hit it off, they become best friends, they have a ton in common. After they graduate from school, they get separate missions, and they get separated. So early 1942, Jay Zemer gets assigned to the 5th Air Force, and he's not happy about it, because the 5th Air Force is also referred to as the Forgotten Fifth. The reason they're called that is because they are stationed in Australia, and their job right now is to basically run a containment war against Japan, trying to slow them down and contain them to the Pacific. And at this point in time, nobody cares about the Pacific theater. The entire world is watching the European theater as America and Great Britain fight their way through North Africa into Italy to take back France and eventually overthrow Germany. That's where the majority of the funding is going. That's where all the attention and glory is. That's the place where young, motivated men like Jay Zemer want to be. But that didn't happen. So Jay shows up to Australia. He is the FMG, the fucking new guy. Nobody trusts him. He has zero street cred. Nobody wants him in their crew. Now, this is partially due to the fact that he's a new guy, and that's just how it goes for new guys, sure. But mainly, it's because the Japanese are kind of kicking America's ass right now. It's mid-1942. America just got involved in this war. A lot of their pilots are inexperienced. A lot of their equipment's outdated, and everybody's giving all the funding to the European theater, so it's not a great time. And you gotta remember, since this is 1942, America hasn't come out with the Hellcat or the Corsair yet, meaning that America has no fighter plane capable of going toe-to-toe with the Japanese Mitsubishi Zero. So even if the bombers did have a fighter escort, they weren't capable of going toe-to-toe with the Japanese Zeros anyways, so it has never been more dangerous to be inside of a bomber, and it has never been more important to have everybody in that bomber crew as good as possible to increase everybody's chances of survival. Ipso facto, nobody wants to risk it on giving another guy a shot. So it becomes apparent to Jay early on that if he ever wants to get up in the air, he's going to have to do some gangster shit. So he goes over to the bulletin board, and on that bulletin board are the missions that are deemed so incredibly dangerous that they are volunteer basis only, and he starts volunteering for all of them, filling in any position where he's needed. The majority of these missions would wind up being reconnaissance missions, which is where they're going to take a B-17 flying fortress. Instead of filling it with bombs, they're going to fill it with extra fuel tanks, equip it with cameras, and send it way off into enemy-held territory all by itself to hopefully get some valuable intel. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, a single bomber flying alone in enemy-held territory is extremely dangerous, and nobody is about to let their pilot or co-pilot be the brand new guy fresh out of school, so Jay just has to fill in wherever there's a gap. Over time, he winds up doing everything. He's a tail gunner, a ball gunner, a waist gunner, a navigation guy, a radio guy. He can do everything, and eventually he works himself up enough credit that they let him be co-pilot for a little while. And while he's working as a co-pilot, he figures out something very, very important. You have to remember, he's an engineer. He loves taking things apart, figuring out how they work, why they work, trying to make them better. And while he's sitting in the co-pilot seat, he figures out how the Japanese Zeros are tackling the B-17s. You have to remember, this is 1942. The B-17s that they are flying are the B-17Bs. They are the first generation of mass-produced B-17s ever, and they have one fatal flaw, and the Japanese figured out how to exploit it. You see, the B-17s have a ton of machine guns all over them to defend themselves. They have a tail gunner, a ball gunner, a waist gunner on each side, and a turret on top. The problem is, none of those can shoot in front of the plane. The only thing the front of the plane has is two 30 caliber flex guns, which you can kind of see right here, which might as well be nothing at all when it comes to shooting down an actual plane. Later generations of the B-17 would end up getting more firepower and turrets on the front to help alleviate this issue, but at this point in time, they didn't have that, so the Japanese Zeros would approach from behind, well out of range of the machine guns, pass the B-17 altogether, and then go and do a U-turn and approach the B-17 head-on and shoot it down, where the B-17 had no way to defend itself. And during his time as a co-pilot, Jay Zemer caught on to this and developed a plan. Fast forward, Jay Zemer on his first mission, he finally got enough street cred, and there was finally a mission dangerous enough that they were going to let him be the pilot. Sure enough, a Japanese Zero shows up, does the exact same thing, passes outside the range of the guns, does a big U-turn, comes back to confront Jay's B-17 head-on. As soon as the Zero gets within range, Jay takes his B-17, turns it up on a wingtip, and banks, exposing the belly of the B-17 to the Zero, forcing the Zero to go the exact opposite direction and down, putting it directly in the firing lines of both the belly gunner and the tail gunner, shooting down the Zero. And that is just one of multiple combat maneuvers that Jay has engineered inside of his head, pushing the B-17 airframe to its absolute limit. Fast forward into the mission, he lands the plane, no problem. The entire crew gets out and swears that they are never getting on a plane with Jay Zemer flying it ever again. And that becomes the new norm for a couple months. Jay went from the new guy that nobody trusted to fly, to now he's so good, he's crazy, and we're scared to fly with him. That was until a bunch of new reinforcements showed up on the island, and among them was none other than his best friend, Joe Sarnofsky. So Jay and Joe start volunteering to go on a bunch of dangerous missions together. Same thing happens every time they fly on a mission. Pretty much everybody else on the plane refuses to ever go on a mission with those two ever again because they're absolutely crazy. But every once in a while they find somebody just crazy enough to keep flying with them, and over the course of a couple months they build up an entire air crew that starts volunteering together on every dangerous mission available, earning them the nickname the HELLDIVERS. Making up the team, we have Bud Thule, apparently the only man smart enough to be a navigator and crazy enough to fly with these guys. And then, of course, we have Jay Zemer as the pilot, Joe Sarnofsky as the bombardier, and from there it just gets completely out of hand, because after that we have the radio expert, William Vaughn, a.k.a. Willie. He is one of the most experienced bomber crew members in the entire U.S. military at this point that's been on countless missions, one of which his B-17 landed to refuel when his crew was ambushed by 500 Japanese soldiers. They took the machine guns out of their B-17 and proceeded to defend themselves in a firefight for 10 hours until the Australians showed back up. During that 10 hours, Willie had 14 confirmed kills, 4 of which were in close quarters combat, 2 with his Colt 45 1911, and 2 with his knife. Jay Zemer said he didn't plan on getting into any knife fights at 30,000 feet, but if he did, he had Willie. Next we have camera expert and waist gunner George Kendrick. Typically on a B-17 you're supposed to have one waist gunner on either side of the plane, but Kendrick preferred to man both sides completely by himself. When Jay Zemer asked him if he wanted to find another waist gunner for the other side, Kendrick said, and I quote, These are my guns, and I'm going to shoot all of them. I don't need to be bumping asses with another guy while I do it, which is the most American shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Next, we have Johnny Abel, a 19-year-old farm kid that's so mechanically gifted that he is deemed more valuable as a mechanic on the ground than he is a member of a bombing crew. Despite that, he wants to be a pilot. So, Jay is teaching him how to become a pilot, but in the meantime, he's the topside turret gunner. Next, we have the tail gunner, and he's the biggest, fastest, strongest man in the entire 5th Air Force, Herbert Pugh, a.k.a. Pudge. There was a couple other stragglers that came and went on a couple missions here, a couple missions there, but this was it. This was a core group of men that became best friends and went on the most dangerous bombing runs and reconnaissance missions that the war had to offer. Because of this, they very quickly built up an incredible reputation and became too valuable to lose. At which point, leadership doesn't let them go out on the dangerous missions anymore, and they send them out on a regular bombing run with like 10 other B-17s, and if that wasn't bad enough, they're going to make Jay and his men be the first bomber in line, which if you don't know, is the safest bomber in the entire run, because as soon as their bombs hit the ground, that's what alerts the enemy that they're even there. So when they go through, there's no enemies manning the anti-aircraft guns, so they're done and gone by the time there's any enemies returning fire. It's that 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th plane that faces the real danger, and that's just not okay with Jay and his men. So they go out on the mission just like they're ordered to, and they are the first ones to drop their bombs, just like they're ordered to. They make a clean getaway, they get out to open ocean, at which point Jay tells his men, get ready for a fight, because he does a U-turn, goes back in, flies over the enemy compound at 1,000 feet, while his men from the ball turret, the waist guns, and the tail guns open fire on the enemy's anti-aircraft positions on the ground, literally becoming a ground attack plane like they're an antique C-130. They were able to knock out all of the enemy spotlights and most of their anti-aircraft positions, and every single B-17 on that mission made it back home. So Jay, the Eager Beavers, and all the other B-17s on this mission make it back to base completely okay, at which point Jay is treated like a hero by his commanding officers. No, I'm just kidding. You see, the commanding officers can't give themselves a bunch of medals if their men are defying orders but doing the right thing because it makes them look bad. So naturally, Jay is somehow the bad guy here, so he and the Eager Beavers are all confined to quarters, pending court-martial. The only reason that Jay and his entire crew weren't kicked out of the military right then and there was because there was a journalist in Australia with the 5th Air Force that heard this story from one of the other B-17 crews, and they reported on it, writing a story that would end up getting read by a congressman that wanted it investigated, and he demanded and ordered that chain of command to give Jay, Joe, and all of his men on that airfield a silver star. So at that point, Jay and all of his men get a silver star. Leadership just kind of has to drop the issue, but also, fuck these guys, we're not going to give them easy missions anymore. We're only going to give them the hardest missions we have, and if they die, they die. We don't really care anymore because they made us look bad. Which is exactly what Jay and his men wanted all along, so it all works out. Alright, fast forward, next big dangerous mission, officially known as Flight of the Geishas. Naval codebreakers have deciphered enough messages to figure out that in the city of Raboul there's a hotel, and the penthouse of that hotel is being used as an exclusive officers club where they are being entertained by a bunch of geishas and getting hammered. And among those officers is rumored to be none other than Admiral Yamamoto, the leader of the entire Japanese Navy. Their mission is to fly in with a single B-17 under the cover of night, bomb that hotel, take out all the high-ranking officers, and make a clean getaway. So Jay and the crew get pulled in, they get briefed on the mission, no big deal, everybody's gonna go off to bed, they got a big day tomorrow. Everybody except for Joe Sarnofsky. He stays up